Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much to everyone who's attending virtually with us tonight. We have a really special guest tonight, and I could not be possibly more excited to host our guest tonight. Elio Villafranca was born in Cuba, and he is a Steinway and Sons artist, a Grammy-nominated pianist, and the 2014 Jazz at Lincoln Center Millennium Swing Award. He's an incredible pianist and composer, trained at the Instituto Superior de Arte in Havana, Cuba. And since his arrival in 1995, he has had a host of accomplishments, not the least of which is receiving a Grammy nomination for his recent album Cinque, that same album received 4.5 out of 5 stars in DownBeat magazine. He has been honored as the Rising Star jazz pianist several years now, and he has performed and recorded internationally and nationally as a leader with musicians such as Pat Martino, Terell Stafford, Billy Hart, Paquito de Rivera, Eric Alexander, Louis Nash, David Murray, and Wynton Marsalis, among many others. Mr. Villafranca we're so excited to have an artist of his caliber, literally renowned without the world as a pianist, as a composer, and from what my good friend Kevin Jones tells me, just an absolutely amazing human being. Please put your virtual hands together and welcome Elio Villafranca.
Hey.
Elio, hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you, Jordan, for such a beautiful introduction. I feel very humble with you.
Well, we feel so excited to have you on the show, and I could not be more excited to get to know you as somebody who is also, but definitely. I think your playing speaks for itself, and when you have such an investment in the lives of others as you do as a teacher, I think it's really an incredible gift. So, first question I'd like to ask you is, how did you get started playing the piano?
Well, it was almost like as a mean of kind of like for the lack of playing all the instruments. When I started really taking piano seriously was when I was at the school at the ENA, Escuela Nacional de Arte in Cuba. And I remember we used to do these jam sessions. And at the time I was studying percussion. Mm. So we used to have these jam sessions, and every time I went to the place where we will have those jam sessions, all the drums were already taken. The drummers, the congas, everything was already taken. The only thing that was left was the piano, because nobody could really play Cuban music or jazz or anything in the piano. I didn't know either. But in the descargas, in the jam, nobody really knew how to use the piano for that. And then I decided to sit at the piano because I didn't have any other instruments to play. I wanted to play so badly. So I want to sit on the piano, and then I start trying to make it up as it goes. And then it became like this kind of like a routine kind of thing. And then I started seeing like people actually looking for me to sit on the piano. And then that was when I make the conscious decision, okay, well, if I'm going to be sitting at the piano that much often, so I should definitely start taking the piano seriously. At the time, my school was pretty much 100% classical music. That's the reason why people didn't know what to do with the piano, because it was basically classical music training. And I was taking piano lessons, of course, as a classical pianist, but not necessarily in popular music. And that's when the world went in. So I wanted to know how to play the piano in that environment. and then that's when I decided to take the piano seriously.
Absolutely. So tell me about growing up in Havana. I've actually never had the opportunity to travel there, but I've heard that there's music all over the place. And what was it like growing up in that environment and in that particular cultural and musical setting?
Yeah, well, actually, to start from the beginning, I was more growing up in Pinar del Ri, which is my hometown,
Okay. All right.
in San Luis in Pinar del Ri. So I went to Havana after, I went to already a music school in Pinar del Rio, elementary music school, and then I went to do the high school in Havana. But my growing up in the musical environment was started in Pinar del Rio. There, it was a different environment. It's true in Havana, the streets, you see a lot of people playing, and it's a lot of, when you go through those alleys and those barrios, and in Havana Vieja, you always hear music, you always see people playing, and you can look through a window and you see a ceremony, an Afro-Cuban music ceremony, Santeria or something. But in my hometown, I had a different experience, because in my hometown, we didn't have that, but we had a very heavy tradition that came from the Congolese part of Africa, and this one is called tambor yuca. And when I was as a kid, I used to witness this this tradition very closely, because my house was really next to a place that it was called Casa de Cultura, which is a place where in Cuba anybody can just go and take music lessons or painting. I started as a painter, for example. I started in the Casa de Cultura, started painting first, before music. And then from there, I discovered the guitar, and then I picked up the guitar, and I was playing guitar for a year. And then until then, the auditions to go into music school came, and then I couldn't have an audition for guitarist because there was no more room for guitarists. So that's how I entered the school as a percussionist. But I entered school as a percussion because I have witnessed this tambor yuca earlier when I was a kid, and I remember being on the street and then seeing this man carrying these really big drums and then setting up a fire in the middle of the street for any celebrations, and then they would put the drums around it, and then of course later on I learned that was the way to tune that drum. But at first, when I see the fire, I was very excited about the fire. Oh my God, it's fire on the street, But that's my upbringing growing up in the musical environment, was through the tambor yuca of that Congolese tradition of that. Then when I went to Havana, then it was a whole different experience. There, I learned about jazz. For example, I had no idea about what jazz was. But in Havana, I went for the first time to the jazz festival in Havana, and I saw, Richie Cole performing, and I saw Dave Valentin as well. I saw many different really great groups, and that was my beginning of my encounter with jazz. And then of course the Afro-Cuban part of the music. Once again, I was in a classical environment. I have no access to the other part of the Afro-Cuban music, like Santeria or Arara or anything like that, because I was studying percussion, but I was doing more classical percussion. Then eventually the school evolved into integrating teachers from the Afro-Cuban traditions to teach at the school. And that's when I started then having a little bit of access to the music, and then that's when my interest went up, and then that's when I go to the street and then seek more for those opportunities to witness this, to witness that, because I wanted to understand it. And my teachers sometimes would take us and oh, hey, there is a talk, it's a religious ceremony somewhere, I can get you in, so you can go in. So that's how everything was just narrowing in, and then evolving into what I know today and what I do today.
Wow, that's incredible. And so what I'm getting from you is that it's such a growing up in that environment was really something that shaped you growing up as a percussionist. By the way, Kevin said that you're a great percussionist. He kind of gave you a little bit of a shout out there.
Thank you.
We take questions from our audience, and one of them is from Jake. And Jake says, "What have you been up to during the pandemic era? What projects have you been working on?"
Oh, that's a great question. When the pandemic started, of course, like every musician, we all panicked, right? Like, oh my God, we're losing all the job. I had an extensive tour planned. I was supposed to go to Shanghai. I was supposed to go to Guangzhou also to do a residency in China. I was supposed to go to other parts of Europe. I was supposed to go to Bolivia. I mean, I had a lot of plans. And then when the pandemic happened, then all the scene died. I was also supposed to go to Mexico. So then we panicked, and then all the musicians went into, hyper kind of like, okay, I need to continue creating, be creative and continue doing things. And then people went into the online, Zoom, and then all these things started developing concert. But there was a time that I felt that everybody was doing the same thing, but I want to do something different. So I was looking at what I was, like years back, and when I had these other projects that never really, I finished them. So I decided I'm gonna maybe take this opportunity when I'm not traveling to then finish those projects. And then I thought about two projects. One was a children's book that is called Who Ate the Pie, and that book actually came out. It came out under the Arthur House company, and then is sold in Amazon, and it's also sold in Barnes and Noble. That's one thing, and that book is basically a children's book. But I did some music for it, and it was a story for little children. And then I don't know. I thought like, well, in the pandemic, there's a lot of people were staying at home. And then at least we have music. I can always sit at the piano and play and spend my time. But I was thinking about the children's, like, they're probably having a really, really hard time. And then, of course, the whole notion of everybody being zooming in the computer, I thought like, well, people need to start back to reading and seeing something in paper and that is no computer. Then I did that book. Then the other project that I have that I'm still in process of doing was to do a book about the piano in Cuba. Years ago, I was signed by Smithsonian to do this book. It's called Cubano, which is a book speaks about the history of Cuban music through the eyes of the pianist. Because people don't know this, but through the entire evolution of Cuban music, piano has a very important role in it. Like Cuba had, 60 years after the piano was invented in Europe, we already had the piano in Cuba. Only took 60 years for the piano to come to Europe to Cuba. And if you consider how long of the trip is and how big the world is, only 60 years to make it into Havana, that's amazing. So
yeah, that's pretty fast.
That's pretty fast, exactly. It's pretty fast. So and then the piano has always been involved in the evolution of pretty much many genres. It started with the danzón, with the contradanzas and the danzas and the danzón, which is actually the national form of Cuban music. And then the son started with the guitar. That's the influence of course, Spanish. That's when the guitar, from the guitar came the tres and all these things. And then the son started like that. But after the son got to Havana in 1910, then the piano got more involved in the son. And then from that point, then the piano took over again. And then everything evolved around the piano. So the piano has been like very crucial instrument on that in the evolution of Cuban music. So I did a book about that, and that book is still in process. And aside from those two books, of course, I wrote a bunch of music. I have two projects that I have to finish. One is I'm supposed to maybe go to the studio this year for one of the two, or the two. I don't know if it's possible. But one is called Life Stories, which is just basically looking at after Cinque. I was thinking, well, what can I do, right? Something that has the same magnitude of music and relevance in history. Mm-hmm. I did one thing. Once was a story, a project called Don't Change My Name. It's a story about Florentina. It's a story about a woman called Florentina that was an enslaved woman that was brought from Africa to Cuba, similar to Cinque, but in this case, this was a woman, so I wanted to do something with a female. And then they changed their name in Cuba to Florentina, and then she became like a leader in the Arara community and everything. That's a very, very beautiful, interesting story, because they brought her to Cuba when she was 15 years of age. Yeah. And then the other project is called Life Stories, because I was just looking myself in the mirror and thinking like, okay, I did think this is Florentina, and then I felt like I'm missing something. And what I was missing was like how this music influenced me, how this music, because normally when I do projects, I talk about third parties, like Florentina. When I did Caribbean Tinge, it was also about the music and the influences, always thinking about what is out there, right? But then I never really done anything about like, well, how all this work has influenced me as a person, as a musician, as a composer. So then this project is also called, I think it's called Life Story. It might change because right now it's a work in progress. But that's the two also main projects that I've been working on. And plus I got, some commissions like from Jazz Coalition. I did a piece in commission for them, and I did a couple of concerts for Lincoln Center. I did concert for hospitals, to doctors and patients, and I've been actually blessed with all the amount of work and support that and also creatively I've been very active.
Well, that's really amazing to hear, and it is very, very refreshing. And I would assume that creativity at your level, is pretty difficult to slow down. And I want to just take you back here because we kind of glossed over it a little bit. I want to talk about Cinque, because this, in preparation for this interview, I listened to that record and I was really blown away. Like between the depth of the musicianship and the compositions, it really spoke to me. And I'm wondering, where did you get inspired to create this record? And because, something that emotionally deep has to come from inspiration. So what was your inspiration?
Yeah, that Cinque was a very long process. And when I say long, I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about maybe 15 years of process, okay? And the whole story went when I 15 years after I came back to America and realizing I've been exposed to the Congolese music in tambor yuca in Cuba, but I never really did anything about it. I recognized it I've been exposed to this, but most of the time when people talk about Afro-Cuban music, they're talking about Yoruba, right? The bata and sambos and all these things, and the Congo. They talk about more of the music that has become mainstream, if you will, in the Afro-Cuban kind of language. Nothing to do with the Congolese music, especially tambor yuca, because tambor yuca is a tradition that is very obscure. It's only right now present in Pinar del Ri, the region where I live, and it's only practiced by very small amount of group of people. And it's just if you don't know them, you don't have access to them. It's very home-based kind of form of practice. So I got a grant many years ago, and then I started researching them back and documenting them and interviewing them and going back home. Basically, every time I went back home, I would be with them for a week and talk to them, and we played together, and I asked them questions. I hear all the stories and everything. So I had a vast amount of documentation on the music. So that's one thing. So then, in maybe 2015, 16, I got a commission from Jazz and Lincoln Center to write a piece. And then I decided to write a piece about Cinque, because I think the story of Cinque was really fascinating to me, especially in the time that we're living today in the society where so much injustice and everything. And I was fascinated by how even at that time, the notion of freedom was so strong that even at that time, freedom prevailed. over anything. And if you think about it, like the way African people were treated at the time, they weren't even seen as human beings. And for Zinke to have revolted on the ship, killed actually the shipman, the owner of the captain of the ship, and then being captured again in America, and then sent to trial when slavery was like full on, in everybody's mind, and then obtaining their freedom by, through the court. I'm like, that's really amazing. Like how the concept of freedom is so strong, right? So I was taken by that story. So I did a piece, Troubled Waters was the first piece that I did for that. Mm-hmm. I did Troubled Waters, and then I presented it at Jazz and Lincoln Center. So a lot of people really liked that piece, and then I felt motivated. Maybe I should do a suite about Zinke. Mm-hmm. So then I did the other two movements. I thought like, okay, well, maybe I should. Troubled Waters is about when he was revolting over the ship. I'm thinking like, well, what about when he was free? And what about when he was captured? So that's when I did Zinke. Then I did the other two parts. The first part is called Zinke, that was the story when he was just free as a free man. And then the second part was called the capture. That's when he was basically being hunted basically by the slave owners and stuff like that. Running, I picture him running around and trying to evade them, and then that's why I use this very Congolese, like very straight, strong rhythm. And then and then Troubled Waters was the last piece. That's when he revolted. After he was captured, he revolted. But then I thought like, okay, wait a minute, but Zinke means 5, so it's only 3, and I didn't feel like I didn't have any more material to do 2 more things, because after I did this 3 movement, I thought like that's enough. So then I decided, well, then what about if I focus the entire project on similar story than Zinke, but focus it in Congolese tradition, which is a tradition that I came from. And then I decided to first decided which 5 countries I want to talk about, and then I picked 5 islands from the Caribbean. I picked, we already knew, Cuba. I picked Puerto Rico. I picked Jamaica, Santo Domingo, and Haiti. So I have been in all these places except Haiti. So, and Haiti has such a rich, amazing tradition, very similar to Cuba. So then I planned a trip, and then I went to Haiti, and then I researched the music there. I studied them. I studied the music and interviewed people and documented everything. Because before I write anything, I just wanted to have all the information, access to the information, so I can write with honesty. What I mean by honesty is like I didn't want to write something just because general, kind of like, oh, so this is how the Haitian music sounds like or feels like. I wanted just really to be able to be honest about it, to have experienced it first.
Yeah.
And then I decided to create all, once I made the decision to take these 5 islands, then I thought like, okay, what kind of music I want to focus on? So I decided I want to focus on Congolese music in those 5, in each of those 5 countries. And that's how I made Zinke. That I basically it went through different stages. It wasn't like a one straight shot. It was more like, okay, I can do this. Well, what about this? Oh, I can do this. What about that? And then that's how the whole album became a double album, a double record, because they had so much information. And then the final part was years ago when I was doing the same thing, when I was doing the research on my Congolese, tradition, tambor yuca. Once again, I went to Smithsonian and I say, hey, I have this material. I would love to release this material with you. And they were very interested, and but they were talking about it. And I was like, maybe we need a little bit more, maybe blah blah blah. It's taking too long. And then I said, you know what? What about if I combine those two things? If I combine my original music, and then I give people access to the material that I'm using to write my music and to the story. So then that's how I integrated those research pieces into the recording, so that people can kind of have access to the music that I was just listening to, or that influenced my writing, my composition.
That's such a beautiful example of the evolution of how this project came together, and I thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I'd like to transition next to hearing some of your music, because I can't wait to share this with everybody who's listening who might not be familiar with your playing. So this is Elio Villafranca in his own words, as a pianist. All right, I hope you all enjoy live at Dizzy's Club Coca-Cola.
Willie John III. Willie John III. Okay, thank you so much. That was a tune entitled The Big Plus. And now we're gonna bring our treat for tonight. We're gonna bring the Pleneros de la 21 to the stage. Pleneros de la 21. Camilo Molina, Gaitán, Juango Gutierrez, Nelson Mateo. And then we're gonna have a very song for you in the middle of this song. And this song is entitled Caribbean Tinge.
All right, so our YouTube video is being less than cooperative, but I think that was enough to get the vibe, to get the energy of that that beautiful performance. Yeah, first of all, I mean, I intended to stop it much earlier, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I wanted to get up and dance, but then I knew that would look weird on the camera, and so so that was beautiful. Wow! Just an incredible playing. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you really seem to approach the piano as a composer. Like, I hear all of your rhythmic ideas and your melodic ideas, and they like jump on and off one another. Could you describe your approach to improvising on a tune like this?
Yeah, I mean, composition for me is everything. I mean, composition, actually not for me, composition is everything, right? Like if you go to a sandwich shop, right? They have to, when you order your sandwich, they still have to compose that. They have to kind of like, and everybody put their own spin on that composition. That's why, that's why every sandwich is different, right? Even though you might order the same type of sandwich, in some places tastes better, the presentation is better, presentation, composition, even in a room, everything. I mean, composition literally is everything. The way you dress, the way you carry yourself. So when I'm playing piano, yes, I'm totally thinking about that, and I do have the mind of the composer. My composer switch is always on. When I'm composing and when I'm playing and when I'm doing like a improvisation with no writing, I'm still, it's a composition. It's everything. And I should mention that, for example, like a piece like that project. The original intention was to do something related to the Congolese tradition. But at the time that I was doing that project, the Caribbean Tinge project, I couldn't find anybody who knew about this part of Congolese music, the makuta or the tambor juka and all of that. But since we all in the island share many similar rhythms, so that bomba, that's called bomba from Puerto Rico, that rhythm of bomba is similar to the same, because they have the same heritage on Congolese music, is similar to the same rhythm in Cuba. It's called makuta. So then I wanted a makuta rhythm, but I couldn't find anybody who really knew how to play it. So I thought like, okay, I'm gonna use this bomba rhythm, which is similar. It's the same spirit, the same thing, the same roots, and it was a wonderful idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I just love the energy. I don't know if you saw it there, but we had Tim Franczek up here saying, this is killing, so much energy. The more drummers, the better.
Well, I mean, to have it, actually, I always want to have, a lot of times in my ensemble, I usually use 2 or 3 drummers, because the things like, if you want to give them the experience, the actual real experience on it, you have to have more than one drum. Because normally in the African tradition, no, it's either 3 or 4 or 5. Is but 3 is the most common form, like the caja de mula and cachimbo, which is like 3 different tuning. One is higher, one is mid, the other one is lower. And I don't want to sound like too professorial here, but in a lot of the closer you get to the Afro traditions, you find out like the lowest drum is the one that has the most important role, because it's the one who speaks. And then while the higher pitch is the one keeps the tempo, and and the middle drum is the one who creates a conversation between the low and the middle. But then that changed. If we were talking about rumba, for example, from Cuba, that changed, because the lower drums are not the one who speak. The highest drum is the one who speak, the quinto. And then I always really pay attention to all of these details when I write my music, because I want to give the audience the real experience of what that music's like.
Yeah. And you know what? You apologize for sounding like a professor, but I really get that from you, especially just from talking to you for 40 minutes, I really get that you have a passion for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your music, for sharing your life. And so can you talk about the role that teaching at these three fine institutions that you teach at, can you tell me about the role that teaching plays in your career?
I mean, it's teaching for me is really goes hand to hand with being a performer. Even I take that teaching role even when I'm performing, because whenever I'm writing music, whenever I'm going to present something to the audience, I want that something to be meaningful and has some purpose, and it has some teaching in it. Because what I feel a lot of times that what is missing in all this environment that we're in, the eager to success and what is missing is that thing where people can actually learn something. You can educate people about something, whether it's your tradition or something else, and your background, whether it's in something related to politics or something related to society or I just want basically my music to carry on that mission. And then of course when I'm in a school environment, it's the same. When I'm teaching, I always try to teach from the prospect of real information, real experience. Like, for example, when I teach any institution, right? Like if I do in the music of Horace Silver, right now I'm doing at Juilliard the music of Horace Silver and Moody Shaw. The first things I do is like, okay, I collect information, like a reading material from different books so they can read about it and they can understand why Horace Silver sound the way he sounded. And why Woody Shaw sounds different than Horace, why there was, and then also the context, like, what were the years when they write this music? What was happening in those years that affected their composition and their playing? Because that's the only way you can kind of really, play the music the way it's supposed to be played. Because otherwise, I mean, notes in the paper and the piano, the piano may sound regardless. You can get anybody who never has studied anything and then can put the hands on the piano and it's gonna sound something, right? But that's something, I want that something to have an information, to have a background, have a history. And that's something that the history's changed that something, and that's basically what I'm always bring to my classroom and what I bring to my performance too. Like, when I was talking about Cynthia, I just trying to tell them what it was. And then when I'm talking about like Florentina and when I talk to, I want to just bring that context into the music. I can hear you. I don't know if you're speaking or not, but I can hear you. I can hear you.
I just want to remind everybody that is provided free of charge by the West Michigan. Please donate to our mission if you can. We are going to be bringing you more great artists for Speaking of Jazz, just like Elio Villafranca. And certainly, we've enjoyed our time. Elio, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, we did lose each other for a second there, but sorry about that, everybody. So, I'm wondering if any of the people in our audience have any questions as we wrap up our interview tonight. Anybody have any questions This is a world-class jazz artist. You have his ear. So, what questions do you have for our guest? That was beautiful what you said about your teaching. I really not only could I relate, but thank you for sharing. I just get a lot of the love of music from you, like a lot of the love of composition, a lot of the love of doing what we do, and that is contagious. It's infectious, and I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to speak with you today. We got a question from Kevin. He says, "What was your influence on piano in your early years?"
Wow. Okay. In my early years, there were a couple of people who really kind of like, when I started investigating about the piano, investigating about jazz and how to play Cuban music, because I didn't know how to play Cuban music either at the time. I used to go to Gonzalo Rubalcaba's, sometimes information in Cuba was really lacking. That there was no information, there was no record stores, there was no a radio station where they would play jazz, because at that time jazz was kind of seen the music from the enemy, from the United States. Anything that came from the US in Cuba kind of was banned a little bit. So for that matter, I needed to go to people who were traveling. In that case was Chucho Valdez or Gonzalo Rubalcaba. So I would go to their homes, and then I will ask, hey, can I pick on your books, and then I kind of learn about something. And then I remember they would say, yeah, okay, you can sit down. They would give me like a book of jazz or something that they might have, and then you can kind of just copy it. I would go with a pen and then a lot of manuscript paper, and then I would start like writing by handwriting, like transcribing all the music that I saw there and while they were practicing. I remember listening to Gonzalo Rubalcaba's practice, and then I was like sitting there for hours and hours just writing, trying to get some information. The same thing with Chucho, also Hernan Lopez Nusa. So now in the jazz series, of course, I mean, I one of the first pianists who really impacted me was Chick Corea, of course, because in Cuba a lot of things will come. Like the most main pianists will come, but I wasn't really learning jazz through the ground. I was basically listening to Michel Petrucciani was a big influence of mine. Okay, Chick Corea, and then Herbie Hancock came into the scene. I was like, oh my God, who's this guy? So yeah, and that was really amazing. And then of course Miles and Train and all the things. But I wasn't really been listening to monk so much because we have no access to monk music. But I did have access to a lot to I.G. Rose, for example, which is like something like it maybe people don't consider, but I.G. Rose is an amazing musician, like jazz composer and everything. George Benson was another influence of mine. People who are listening to a time. And then big time Weather Report. Weather Report and George Sauvignon was another like big, that created a big influence of mine to me. And then when I but I knew that I was not really listening jazz in the right way. And when I came to America, actually, what changed what messed me up was my piano, my piano tuner. So I remember I got my first piano, like an upright piano, I was renting it, and then I was so happy to have my piano because I never had a piano. All I had was a guitar when I was, playing guitar at my very early age, but I never had a piano before. So I had my piano, and then I hired a piano tuner to come and tune my piano. And he came super early in the morning. I was super tired. I was like, okay, you tune the piano, I'm just gonna go back to bed and let me know when you finish, and then I come out. So he went to start tuning the piano. I went back to bed and I was kind of sleeping a little bit. But then after he finished the tuning, he start playing the piano. And I just got up. It's like, what is he playing? And then I'm like, oh man, that sounds so good, but I don't know what that is. So I got up and then I went to him and then I kind of like pretended like I was just kind of like whatever, because I didn't want to be invasive and looking at him too direct into his hand. And then, but I could not understand what he was playing. I asked him, so what are you playing? And he said, I'm playing the blues. And I was like, okay. And I said, so you are a professional pianist? And he was like, no, I'm just piano tuner. And then I realized, wait, I've been studying piano for such a long time and I can't do what he's doing. There's something wrong here. So then that's when I realized like I needed to learn jazz from the bottom, because all I knew was just kind of like, yeah, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, and all these fast lines and everything. But those fast lines didn't have a meaning whatsoever, because I was lacking of the knowledge of the blues and the, the foundation of the music. So then I started really asking people and to get lessons and people to teach me a little bit more about the history of jazz, and that's how I evolved as a musician.
That's beautiful. Life lessons from such a place that maybe you didn't necessarily intend on hearing it, but yeah, the blues, so important. We have another question. Houston asks, how could I contact Elio if I have questions in the future?
You can my email is eliojazz@gmail.com. You can write me there. Eliojazz, ELIO Jazz, JAZZ @gmail.com. And you can send a question there if you want to. Yeah.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one or perhaps two more questions, depending on how long they are. So let's we have maybe another question here from our wonderful audience. Question, but Houston says, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Elio, for your incredible stories, for your inspiration. I know that for me, you've made me want to go and sit down at the piano and write some music, and you've inspired me to just to really go and write. And so I can't imagine what you have done for our amazing audience here. So thank you again so much. This is another Speaking of Jazz with the West Michigan Jazz Society. Thank you all for listening. Have a great